Thank you, everyone. I'm contractually obligated to wear my glasses because it's on the cover of my book. But I actually left my glasses in the car, so I'm going to take them off because it's kind of ridiculous. So I'm excited to be here to talk about baby reindeer. No, actually, we're going to talk about AI. You might have heard of it. It's the new topic du jour in tech. There's always a different topic in tech, and this is the one that's really changing things. And a lot of stuff is hype, and some of this is, for sure. But this is a real Cambrian explosion, again, in tech, as happens from time to time. And it's really important because it's such powerful technology. And so we're going to set off this series talking to leaders and politicians and lots of different people about the impact and where it's going and what you all should do as citizens. We're going to run all these podcasts on my On with Kara Swisher podcast. And we've been doing a lot of AI-focused podcasts because we think it's really important for people to understand, especially here in Washington, because the last go-round of the internet, they forgot to regulate it. But, you know, they still have time. So we're going to start talking about, well, I have interviewed Brad right after the election about some of what he was doing in Georgia. So let's start talking about where we are, sort of set the table for where we are going into the 2024 elections. President Trump's efforts to discredit the 2020 election are still reverberating in 2024. He's still talking about it, eroding voter confidence in both of your states. Talk a little bit, Brad, why don't you start? Many years hence, you did your job. You were trying to create free and fair elections, with a lot of pushback from President Trump and others. Talk a little bit about where we are right now in the wake of that.
Well, where we are today is getting ready for another contentious election. I think that's no surprise to anyone. So 2024 will be contentious. So we've been out working statewide. We have what we call our Secure the Vote program. But also working with, we have 159 counties, so working with our 159 county election directors, doing regional meetings with law enforcement, cybersecurity experts, people that are up to speed on AI, and then reaching out with other influencers, national influencers that have a lot of respect throughout the community. Mm-hmm. So really pulling people together so that we do have an information overload of disinformation, that we can respond to it very quickly. So it's really pulling people together to be prepared. We don't know what that'll look like, particularly as it relates to AI, but there could be other things just as we're seeing as the warm-up for this election.
We're going to talk about more specifics, but looking back on where the activity around saying that elections are crooked all the time, where do you think we are as an American public on that?
As a Georgia public, we're actually in pretty good shape because UGA, University of Georgia, and MIT did a poll, and that over 90% of the people came out of the 2022 gubernatorial cycle, felt good about the results, and trusted the process that we had in Georgia.
Okay. Adrian?
First of all, thank you so much for having us. And I think we're in a much better position now than we were in 2020 because 2020 was new. Mm-hmm. It was an experience in election denialism. We'd never seen a candidate refuse to agree to the outcome the way it happened. So much has happened since then. And we saw a lot of the same type of stuff emerge across the country and in Arizona specifically in 2022. So we've got that background to help inform how we move forward. We have seen a lot of the exact same grievance. We've seen a lot of the exact same unfounded accusations and mythologies and conspiracy theories, and call it what you will. And so we're honing in and improving our ability to respond appropriately and correctly. And I think one of the things that we've been able to see since then is the demise of all of these frivolous lawsuits that have been filed. And I think that's also important because what we saw is sort of this litany of litigation and the accusations that were put down when they actually came under scrutiny of the justice system. Mm-hmm. So I think we're in much better shape this time around. I agree with the secretary that it's going to be contentious, but I think the contention is going to be on the political side, and I think that I just think we're better prepared as an election administration family across the country to respond.
So, Secretary Raffensperger, talk about what you're doing to prepare your team for the election, because these things, that case is not happening now for at least till after the election for only one reason, really. But what are you doing to prepare election officials in the state to not have, because the election denialism does continue, it hasn't stopped.
Well, it's really to prepare the voters. And so number one is we went around to all 159 counties and we did health checks, security checks of the equipment, did testing, verifying that the equipment hadn't been tampered with, still accurately recording, doing physical security checks, and then working with the counties to be prepared for an election. And then really we're very active out there on media. When we get letters from organizations saying that, for example, your voter rolls are not as clean as they should be, then we respond back, and we did that back in April with our general counsel, gave them a multi-page letter, point by point. This is how many people that we pulled off. We helped them understand when people aren't on the voter rolls anymore, it's because they moved to another state, they passed away, or they moved within the state, and so we update our voter rolls that way. But we really make sure we're very proactive to get information out to these organizations, because we know that they're going to be on social media, they're going to be saying what they're going to say, and so we want to respond with facts. I think if it's fact-based, it helps.
When we last talked, you were getting death threats, and so were many election officials. Has it softened at all? Death threats are pretty high up. I wouldn't say softened, it's not quite the
no
right
death
word.
threats this week.
Okay.
It's a good week. But from that standpoint, after the election of 2020, I don't want to sound Pollyanna or sophomoric about this, but I think one of the things that helped is that both my governor and I ran for re-election. So we went out and we talked to folks, and we're out there talking to Tea Party people, conservative Republicans, Rotarians, business owners, but just traveling the entire state. And so people got a lot of their answers to their questions, and I think that was helpful for them. But then right now we're being prepared. Like I said, when we've had the presidential primary, we had our general primary. Both times we did obviously logic and accuracy testing, but then we did what's called parallel monitoring. So we actually called a county election office and said, on precinct 3, we're going to come get a piece of your equipment tomorrow during the election, and we're going to monitor that, make sure that we call parallel monitoring, make sure that equipment hasn't been tampered with, just to give people that belts and suspenders feeling that the election is secure, the equipment is secure, you're going to actually record everyone's vote.
So, Secretary Fontes, talk about your election day simulations. What kind of threats are you most worried about? And do you feel confident your team is prepared for that worst case scenario?
Well, a little bit of background. Georgia and Arizona are very different. Georgia's a top-down state. We're a bottom-up state. So I really don't act as the chief election administrator. I'm more the chief election regulator. The counties are the ones that do all of the work. They're the ones that select the polling places, the poll workers. They do the ballot stuff. They do the ballot tabulation. They even acquire their own balloting tabulation equipment, right? So every state does it a little bit differently, but we all have very similar things that we prepare for. With the tabletop exercises that you mentioned, and this is something that law enforcement and the military often do, scenario planning, right? Just imagine Dungeons and Dragons for election administration nerds. And so you walk through, in a couple of hours, you walk through a day, or even in the case that we did in December, you walk through for 5 or 6 hours, the several months leading up to election day. And you throw scenarios out at these teams, and the teams that we assembled back in December included not just election administrators, but it included our vendors. It included law enforcement officials. It included folks from different parts of county government across the state, state, local, and federal officials from other agencies, and some nonprofit organizations also participated. And we utilized, as some of our injects, artificially created deep fakes of myself and of other election officials in the state, first and foremost so that we could get rid of the newness of it, so that we could make folks familiar with the fact, A, that it exists, here's what it looks like, smells like, tastes like, so that if it does emerge during the actual election season, they won't be surprised by it.
Right.
They will have seen it, and this is an incredibly important part of the training. So we run through all kinds of scenarios, but we didn't just do it with elections officials. We then went and did a tabletop exercise for members of the media. We had national media outlets represented. We had a lot of our local media outlets represented. And this month, we're also running tabletop exercises specifically for law enforcement. All of it includes the new wrinkle for this year, which is artificial intelligence. And now generative AI and deepfakes don't pose a new threat, to be very clear. What they do is they magnify and they amplify the same old threats, the same old lies, the same old disinformation that either tries to get people to not vote or tries to lie to them about the time, place, and manner of their vote or something about a candidate, things of this nature, just to misinform and hurt the process. These things are on top of an augmented elections officials certification that our office does, which is the core training. And we had to augment it because we've had such a loss of elections officials, mostly senior elections officials in the vast majority of our counties, but they've been replaced by folks who are coming in wide-eyed. They're anxious about doing the good work that is required to maintain and sustain our democracy. And so we adjusted the training. It used to be, for example, 40 hours of butts in seats Monday through Friday. Terrible way to train people, but that's how the state used to do it. We've changed that, so we've got a lot of different ways that people can refer back to the training, putting a lot of the tools online, especially with some of the specifics. We took out some of the stuff that was very historical in nature, stuff like, this is why this happened in 1860, whatever. No, we're like, we want the fundamentals taken care of.
Well, you have some laws
today.
from the 1860s. That
Well, sadly, yes.
Yeah.
And there will be some Supreme Court judges, I think, who will answer for that soon. But the notion here is we want our folks, for the benefit of the voters, and I think that's always our number one focus, we want our folks to be able to understand and execute the fundamentals of election administration, period. And there's a whole bunch that goes into that. But as long as we're sticking with the fundamentals, we will be okay.
And very quickly, worst case scenario for each of you, and then I'm going to ask a question of President Daniels. Very briefly, worst case scenario would be?
Godzilla.
Okay.
That's as quick as I can be.
All right.
We've got a lot of worst case scenarios that we've been gaming through. Yeah.
Well, I think we've seen that. You have someone that comes up short and just doesn't concede the race and then begins all sorts of misinformation, disinformation. And so it just begins again. So we're just really making sure that we can prepare people best we can. We have done some things to shore people's confidence up. Number one, with SB 202, we have photo ID for absentee voting, which is really modeled after Minnesota. I understand that Nebraska and Kansas use that same process. So people question, well, how do I really know that is them with signature match? Well, it's based on photo ID with driver's license to try and shore up. So every question and concern you had, we're trying to answer that by a fact-based system,
Right.
Making sure we have clean voter rolls. We update our voter rolls, and we do that very well because we're members of that multi-state organization called ERIC. We also have now a partnership with our Department of Driver Services, and they get the driving changes from all other 49 states plus District of Columbia. So even if you're not a member of ERIC, but you go ahead and go to, say, Kansas, get a driver's license there, our DDS finds out, we find out about it, so we can contact the voter. We can't just take them off because we have federal law that we have to adhere to.
Right,
But
so you're trying to keep it,
we
so
can
people,
but
you have
people-
answers.
People move around the country all over the place, and it's a very dynamic, mobile society. So we're trying to give voters confidence in the process. That's what we work on every day so that you understand we're going to have a secure, accurate, and fair election.
Right, but your original answer was Trump Part 2, Godzilla comes back. Okay, so let me ask you, President Daniels, you wrote a book in 2021, What Universities Owe Democracy, that argued that higher education was not doing enough to strengthen democracy in a time that it's being endangered. Universities have been an interesting place these days, too, on that issue, and said that students aren't getting enough civic education. So with the increased sophistication of deepfake technology, heightened tensions in campus protests, how do you look at the impact of the technology on campus discourse and democracy?
So I think it's fair to say we're obviously concerned about the new capabilities, the new technologies, but I think, as was mentioned a few moments ago, these are new steps in already a story that is quite challenged. So, it starts with, at least in the case of post-secondary education, we're dealing with a student body across the United States that by and large has not been exposed to basic civics. Mm-hmm. So even an understanding of responsibilities of citizenship, the nature of our institutions, what are democratic responsibilities, what's the value of democracy. We're dealing with a student body that by and large has not been exposed in a really
In high school or
comprehensive and
wherever.
effective way in K-12 education. It's something like only 25 to 30% of high school graduates in this country have actually been exposed to serious civics. So when they come to university, and you're trying to, at that moment, for the last several years, we spent a lot of time thinking about getting our students registered, making sure that they will vote. But I think all of a sudden, over the last couple of years, we've had this appreciation that there's just these core deficits in terms of the appreciation of the democratic
Which are then
response.
filled in by
You worry in terms of
well, they fill in
what
by
is
social media or wherever
social
they have.
media and all the challenges that we have with that. So I think increasingly we are recognizing that first and foremost we have a responsibility to do some remedial civics work, and we're doing that.
So what does that
literally.
mean? I mean, educating students around AI risks, many of them understand AI, and they certainly are very familiar with online tools, right?
I think probably in terms of, quite apart from getting a core understanding of the importance of democracy and the responsibilities of a citizen in democracy and thinking about discernment, judgment, and just public responsibility in that setting. But I think in terms of AI technologies, the most important thing we can do is media literacy, is helping the students appreciate what it is that is truthful, what you can rely on, how you discern truth from falsehood, what are the signatures that would alert you to the possibility that you're looking at information that is fundamentally flawed and, again, is being propagated, disseminated by spurious sources.
And what works with students in that regard? Because they are online natives. This is a group of people now who are born into the internet
Right.
with it always there. And then you have the people teaching them who are not and who also fall prey to a lot of that.
So it's not easy. And again, I think we're in an early stages of how we develop this programming. We are blessed at Hopkins to have experts like Peter Pomerantz, who thinks a lot about and analyzes disinformation. And so that you can, at one level, convey the challenges that we have seen in a number of different contexts to the students to give them an appreciation of what the risks are. And then I think it's about training, of exposing them to different types of information, so-called information, and allowing them, just in the way that you were describing a moment ago, that people become familiar with deepfakes, how you respond to it, how you smell it, how you ask questions, how you look at other sources to be able to assess whether or not what you're seeing is accurate or not. But I think that's a responsibility that we're seeing as quite fundamental for the university to discharge, and literally to start at the time that our students enter university, first year in orientation, and particularly this year as we get them ready for November.
When you think about that, and I want to get into federal regulation, but when you think about educating people, I think one of the problems was we were in an information desert for so long, and now we're in an information flood, and it's the same amount of damage, on some level. I don't know if what could you possibly teach them that would get through, given all the noise?
So I think it is giving them powers of discernment. And I like to think that when particularly you're looking at the freshman class, they come to university with an expectation that they're going to be able to pursue truth, to discover knowledge. And I think given that instinct, what you want to do is cultivate it, give them techniques so that they're able to function effectively in this environment. So look, they're deluged with information, but I think there is still the capacity to help them navigate this environment and to be able to identify materials, identify sources that are more reliable and that they should act upon, whether as a voter or even in terms of their basic coursework, that this is a world in which they are living in, but we're trying to essentially give them enhanced capabilities within that environment.
So I want to talk first a little bit about regulation. So there hasn't been any meaningful legislation passed having to do with the internet. They're sort of having, I think Chuck Schumer just announced a committee to study AI. I happened to be in the back, and I was like for Christ's sake, you're kidding me. You're going to study it now when it's here. But there's a dwindling window of action before the election, as there always is, and they have yet to pass anything meaningful on the federal level. The Senate released a 31-page AI roadmap, which had no guardrails in it, which is not a surprise. They did pass 3 bills sponsored by Senator Klobuchar, who's seen defeat after defeat on privacy, antitrust, and everything else to safeguard elections from AI. Without federal regulations, is the burden of security on you all? Who gets it? And it's all 50 different versions of something else. So what kind of support and guidance do you get from the federal government? Because some states are not working with CISA at all, which is the one that was helping you all with that.
Well, we actually do partner with CISA.
Yeah.
We have our war room during election day, and so we have federal partners there. They just have greater resources than we could possibly ever hope to have, and they have a bigger horizon. They can look at threat vectors from all over the world.
Right.
So we're grateful for those resources. But the actual coordination between state and federal, we've just not really seen enough yet. We hear talk about things, but things at the federal level just move so much slower. So I don't want to say we're on our own, but we are capable. We're battle tested. But we also have other states, and we also have the National Association of Secretary of States. So we talk about what does good policy look like, and they bring people together at our conferences.
Do you need a federal role here? Because it's
constitutionally, it's delegated to the states.
Yeah.
But there are some threats out there that just with our resources, we'll never be able to see what those are. And so they can really bring things to bear. So we're grateful for CISA and DHS.
Yeah, it is relegated to the states, semicolon, and then Congress has a role as well. We have partnered with our federal partners, just as Georgia has in Arizona, but the Congress has a terrible record here. In 2017, in January, Elections Administration was declared part of the national critical infrastructure that put us under CISA for assistance, and we have zero sustained funding when the states have elections for federal offices under federal rules, on federal ballots, and federal case law, and federal everything except federal dollars. And some people say, well, HAVA once in a while pitches us money. Well, it doesn't give us any money on any sort of a predictable and sustainable way of looking at things. And so all of the duty for putting on federal elections is essentially the most enormous unfunded mandate onto the states. And that's problematic.
You know who they do give money to? Let me give you a hint. 4 pages that detail how Congress should support innovation in AI with billions of dollars in funding going to big tech companies, but the section on defending elections is just a few paragraphs.
But some of us out in the states have tried to put together some regulations within our states. Now, those are limited, of course, and they're not coordinated very well, but we're trying. And so that's one of the reasons why at the National Association of Secretaries of State, and some of us in various ways on our own, are really, giving it the old college try, if you will, if you'll forgive, Mr. President, to try to make sure that we're protecting our voters and protecting our democracy. And I won't say we're completely alone. I will say that, CISA has been a very, very important partner for Arizona and several other states.
Which Republicans want to defund quite a few of them, but go ahead.
Well, sure, but for me, it's, and I get it. I just want to have a good election. I could really kind of care less who gets the credit for what. I want to make sure that my voters are protected. I want to make sure that my staff feels safe. I want to make sure that we can actually continue to perpetuate this democracy, regardless of how that ends up happening. But we do have to pay very close attention in the larger scheme of things. If and when somebody is complaining about how elections are so important and it's the biggest deal in the world and blah, 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 great. Express your values in your budget. At the end of the day, when you're talking to somebody about what's important to them, ask them how they're spending their money. And it's clear to me that Congress does not value elections administration.
Yeah, I've noticed. What would you like to see? What federal regulation would you like to see?
I really don't have a great insight on that. What I will say is our counties, our 159 counties, have really invested in their local county election offices, new facilities, upgraded facilities. Really grateful to see that. That is something that they do with their own hard-earned tax dollars, and so they recognize the importance. And our General Assembly has done some of the funding. We could probably use more. If you look at how many elections folks we have, it would be grateful to have a bit more. But still, it's really the states and the counties that are carrying it to that point when we are actually administering the federal part of the elections. I think that making sure that CISA and DHS can come alongside of us, not to tell us what to do, but just provide us information and look out for the bad actors that are out there.
Foreign threats and things like that.
Because there are a lot of potential threats. AI, I saw the deep fake that was on the last show we did, and it was very good. And so it's just amazing what you can do with AI. And so it's really responding to that and being very proactive. I'll let the feds decide what they're going to do, but it's getting pretty late in the season for them to do much because it seems to take 5 to 10 years for them to pass a bill.
Never actually is when they do it. So they haven't. They really. It's really quite astonishing. But TikTok, they got TikTok. So do you think voters understand the risks related to AI? All three of you, and President Daniels, why don't you start? What about students and the impact of what they're getting? Do they understand the risks of AI?
I think they understand the benefits of AI. Increasingly we're seeing that, in students' preparation for courses and so forth, and this is a good AI. It allows them as a first cut on a set of issues that they may be grappling with in courses. It allows them to do a quick sort of survey to get some background
You do know
information.
students have been cheating for centuries.
That's where, but then it goes that next step, which is actually its risk and benefit. That's where it becomes more problematic. But look, I think it goes back to where I started a few moments ago. I think just treating this as a technical issue around the problems of AI, I think, at least from my perspective, loses the broader context for the growing indifference, the cynicism that you see within young Americans about the nature of our democratic process. And so I think it's really important that we reinstill the importance, the value of that, because even your ability to cultivate capabilities in the students to be able to discern good from bad information, to act on good rather than bad information, ultimately, I think requires a predisposition to believe that truth matters, that it's worth exercising your agency to find truth and to act on that, and that matters for democracy. But again, in a setting where there's indifference or cynicism
or hopelessness,
then I think just looking at the technical challenges of AI misses, I think, the more fundamental point that we have to worry about.
But I guess that's the point of it, is to make you feel hopeless and overwhelmed. What about voters? How do you change that? I mean, obviously, you've been on the receiving end of a lot of people coming up to you saying, I'm assuming, some things that you were like, that is untrue. How do you talk to someone like that who says something that's outlandish about the election?
Well, first of all, they have to really want the information, but they'll sit down. When I go to group meetings, the Republican Party meetings where they actually maintain order, said, give me about 7 to 8 minutes, let me kind of say my piece, what I want to talk about. If you want to go back and we'll talk about the 2020, and then you'll take your questions one at a time, and I'll answer them. And that's what we do. And then people get their information. They may not like the results, but now they have the facts. And so I want to make sure that whatever I give them is always fact-based. We can argue about opinions, but you can't argue with the facts. And so that's really what I've...
but you can.
Well, they can, but the facts are the facts, and it's established. I wrote probably it's a 7 to 10 page letter to Congress, which they got on January 6th, point by point. And every fact, none of it has changed, except at that time we had found 2 dead people and we found 2 more. So a total of 4, not 4,000. But those kind of facts we like to give people so that they understand this is what happened. And you may not like the results, and as a conservative, we were very certainly surprised by those results. It's a shock to our system. But these are what the facts are. But I think you have to talk to people, and some will engage, and then other folks just don't want to hear that, and unfortunately, they're going to stay stuck where they are. And I think knowledge is power, and I think I've always tried to find, what the answers are to solutions. I'm an engineer, so I'm probably problem solution oriented, and I like facts. I lean into them.
How do you deal with it? Because there are I get a lot of emails, I'll just say.
Probably none from Arizona, because everything's just
Carrie Lake.
easy peasy
I'm like,
from
stop
there.
writing me, Carrie.
My colleague is exactly right. I think he and I have a different tone in our approach. I tend to be a bit more direct and in the way that I deal with these things, but there's a broad chasm of difference between the culture of gentle society in Georgia and the scorpions for breakfast eating Arizona. And so you really have to talk to the folks that you're talking to where they are and the way that they're going to pay attention. And this is just the reality of communicating. It's the reality of leadership. You're not going to lead a group of third graders the way you lead a platoon of Marines. It just doesn't happen the same way. And that's not to say that there's third graders or Marines necessarily involved here, but the bottom line is when I talk to voters, I will generally ask the questions and lead them through in a little bit more of a Socratic way. Like, well, where did you get that information from? And what makes you think that that's actually true? And have you actually looked at the volumes of reports that Maricopa County has put out? Or have you actually read the conclusions from any of these court cases where all of the accusations were found to be completely frivolous or baseless? And by putting the burden back where it belongs, because the shifting of the burden has been what has been really most disturbing, right? Prove to me why you're not wrong.
Right.
Like that's not how it works. We're supposed to, in this country, let the accuser be the one with the burden of proof, and that has been shifted, and skillfully so. And so by returning the burden onto the accuser, you get some credibility. And again, you might get a hurt feeling here and there, but we cannot shy away from the responsibility I think we have as responsible citizens to hold the partner in the discussion to account.
Yeah.
Right? There's a responsibility that we bear. And if they change subjects, just gently say, well, I get that, but let's go back to what you said earlier, and you still have to answer the following.
Certainly.
And so that, to me, is important.
It's really nice that you're spending so much time with Elon Musk, helping him along. No, I'm kidding.
I'm not going to say anything.
All right, okay. None of us should. So I want to finish up with two different questions. I want to end on the positive uses of AI, but before that, President Daniels, a new study from the AI Democracy Project's and nonprofit media outlet Proof News shows that AI chatbots are serving up inaccurate and incomplete election information. With so many students, as you said, turning to chatbots, what's the responsibilities like OpenAI, we're going to talk to Mira in a second, that the information is correct? Because a lot of it has been left to these companies to do whatever they want. Most of AI right now is controlled by 4 or 5 big companies, and the government has almost no role in it. And they will have control of it. And of course, as everybody knows, there's a big fight at OpenAI over security versus productization. I'll talk to Mira about that. But one of the people safety executives who recently left, I think it's Jan Leike, he said OpenAI's safety and culture processes have taken a backseat to shiny products. This is what these companies are going to do. Products are their business. They have shareholders. There's trillions of dollars at risk. How do you, if we're going to be using these companies as our guardrails, I feel like that might be a problem. How do you look at that?
So I think clearly the quality of these platforms and the extent to which they're going to take these issues seriously in terms of identifying disinformation is really important, and particularly in light of the discussion we just had a moment ago in terms of the sluggishness of a governmental response. So we may be in a second-best world where we have to look to these platforms to self-regulate and to self-regulate with a view to the public interest, but that's where we are. And I think that this is why it's really important at this moment that we're able to communicate in a relatively clear way the expectations we have around the responsibilities of these platforms to think about the mechanisms available to them to be able to flag, to discipline, and some cases eliminate in extremis these deep fakes.
Which they are loath to do. You know, it's sort of like you're doing a great job, Brownie, from back in the day of the Louisiana thing. Nobody will remember that reference. But relying on these big companies to decide this kind of stuff, how do you both feel about this? Brad, you first, and then.
Well, the challenge you have is that so much of the social media and media companies are really just bias machines. Looking in Georgia, when Stacey Abrams lost back in 2018, everyone just kind of leaned into her myth of voter suppression. When it got to the court of law, we won that case and she never appealed. Then you look at what happened in 2020. Then there's all that misinformation that was put out, and a lot of people just regurgitated it, never pushed back. And then rolled into when we passed the Election Integrity Act, we got round 2 of that. People said that we actually decreased the number of days of early voting. No, we actually increased it by 1 day. We lost an all-star game about all that disinformation and misinformation. So I think that there is a point now where these organizations need to really be held accountable, but also show some responsibility. Because if you just let people get on there and you say it's a town square, you can say whatever you want. But if it's not based by fact, all you're doing is spinning people up and playing with their emotions. And that, in a way, is actually emotional abuse. You shouldn't be doing that to people. It's not fair to them. So I think that's where I really struggle with these companies, because you want to make sure that people have free speech. I get that. But there has to be some kernel of fact in it. And some of the stuff is just made up out of whole cloth.
Yeah.
I
They're
think
not public squares, by the way. They're private corporations that are the most powerful companies.
Well, and I think private corporations understand something, or they should be smart enough to understand the following. Democracy is good for business. Find me a totalitarian or authoritarian regime where entrepreneurs can thrive, where opportunity will take someone from the lowest socioeconomic space into the highest, where a consistent enforcement of regulation, permitting, licensing by an unbiased part of the government is going to let you compete in a free system on the economic side. Democracy is good for business. And I think once corporate America, particularly these companies, are looking at that, understand that they thrived, they got big, they got great, I guess, under a democracy, not under an autocracy, not under a theocracy, not under any of this. That's where business thrives. And I think the business community, particularly the business community in Arizona, has been on the fore of advancing, interestingly, some of the most important things that we've done. The Martin Luther King Jr. holiday in Arizona was run down by the Arizona legislature, but it was business interests behind the scenes who pushed it through on a popular vote. We're the only state to have that holiday by virtue of popular vote. Marriage equality came by because the chambers of commerce across the state said, this is good for business. We defeated the first version of SB 1070, the Papers, Please law, because it was bad for business to do the wrong things by our people, all of our people. And I think once the business community, and particularly these companies, understand democracy is really good for business, for innovation, for forward movement in technology and law and medicine, in the arts, that's when they're going to figure it out and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should regulate better within ourselves, because this is the environment, an open society and a democracy where we can continue to make money for our shareholders and achieve that number one reason why America was built. The business of America is business, and democracy is good for business.
So, thank you for that speech. I appreciate it. Democracy is good for
you kinda
business.
asked,
But it
yeah.
also dies in darkness, apparently. Actually, it dies in the full light of day, just FYI. Last very brief question, as we're a little bit over time. One positive thing you see from your jobs for AI. Let's start with you.
Oh,
Briefly.
It's just the huge impact that it can have, for instance, in healthcare, something at Johns Hopkins that we see in a number of different areas. But the capacity to have enhanced diagnostic capability in dealing with, instead of having human-read radiological imaging and so forth, relying on AI, the ability to identify new drug targets. It's actually dizzying in terms of the positive story for what AI can do.
I think every economic cycle, every 50 years, has a new technology, and this looks like what it is. So I think it's going to really spin off things that we can't even comprehend right now, but probably even more into manufacturing, and some of the advancements we'll see will be based on what we learn from AI, or what AI can actually help us to improve autonomous manufacturing.
That's great. I'm enjoying the Brad Raffensperger deepfakes, too, but go ahead.
We are,
There's a lot of them.
I think we just reinvented fire. Right, and I think the untapped human potential that AI will free us up from so much of the mundane that we have to do to sustain our society. That untapped human potential could take us into places, I agree, that we cannot imagine, but it'll be in every sector. It won't just be medicine or business or manufacturing or technology. It'll be in the arts and sciences. We'll be able to do so much more as a species, and I really love the upside of this thing.
Yeah, the thing about fire is you don't know if it's going to warm your house or burn it down.
Well, that's
think that's a famous. I think Mae West
yeah.
quote. I believe that's
You
Mae
wanted
West
an
or Joe
upside,
quote.
and then you kind of had.
Yeah. Anyway, on that, we want to thank them very much, and we're going to bring out Mira Maradia. Thank you so much.